Can the Kansas City Chiefs make history as the first team to ever three-peat?
An annoying loss, but a positive process.
Chris Middleton is no longer a member of the Milwaukee Bucks, and Kyle Kuzma is.
Brandon Ingram has been traded to the Toronto Raptors.
Ohio State is promoting Brian Hartline to offensive coordinator.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
As Jimmy Butler is heading to the Bay Area.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Golden State Warriors get Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler, the two-way player, is heading to Golden State. The Heat get Andrew Wiggins. They get PJ Tucker and a protected first. The Detroit Pistons get Lindy Waters and Josh Richardson. The Utah Jazz get Dennis Schroeder, and the Raptors get Kyle Anderson. So Anderson, Schroeder, Wiggins, Lindy Waters, and a protected first are what's shipped out of the Bay Area, and that is what Miami gets. And the Warriors get a standalone talent in Jimmy Butler, someone who has been suspended, someone who is excellent when the lights shine brightest. And we're talking a catalyst to a player that's taken his team to the NBA Finals, and now he plays next to Draymond Green, Stephen Curry, and the big one that you lose is Andrew Wiggins. The big question, Kolsky, did the Golden State Warriors just get better today? And I guess the bigger question is the extension. 3 days ago from Windhorst, we heard he had no plans of signing an extension in the Bay Area. Is this some sort of a crazy salary dump? What is to make of this to start?
Oh, man. So much to say. Dennis Schroeder, we hardly knew you. I think, okay, so a couple things. Let's start with who they sent out. Anderson, Schroeder, Wiggins, Waters. You know, I guess people like Lindy Waters. I like Lindy Waters well enough, but none of those pieces are a significant part of the future, right? None of those pieces really matter to your future. Schroeder's expiring. Anderson had a couple years on his deal, but like he's in his that's not an important.
But Wiggins matters. He's been playing great. And the big question that's going to be brought up is Jimmy Butler at this point, and a 35-year-old Jimmy Butler as compared to a 29-year-old Wiggins. Wiggins having a fringe all-star-like season. He's been giving you the same numbers as Jimmy Butler. This is one of those trades where I personally don't like it. I'm not a fan of it, but I am intrigued by it. I'm interested by it.
Yeah, well, let's put the Wiggins part aside, because that, I agree, is probably the most interesting discussion point here, right? Like, what is the upgrade from Wiggins to Butler? But the bigger point, before we get to that, is that you did not have to put Kuminga, Moody, Podziemski, or an unprotected pick into this deal, right? So the guys that the Warriors look at as the young core of the future are still intact. You know, now, is that going to be a good team in 5 years? I have no idea. Probably not. They're going to need.
All right, let's get hold on real quick, because we got to get this out of the way right now. It's that Jimmy Butler obviously has signed an extension. So a 2-year, $121 million extension to stay in Golden State through the 2026-2027 season. So this is no salary dump. Jimmy Butler is a part of this Warriors future. Back to it, Kolsky.
For 3 years, this year and 2 more, right?
Yes.
And that lines him up with Steph and Draymond. So the old guys are grouped together here, and the Warriors basically have this year and 2 more to try to get something done.
So everything we said, get younger, no more Jurassic Park music. What's the new Jurassic Park coming out?
Well, they didn't get older, though, right? I mean, I would like this way less if they had to put somebody under 25 that matters into the deal, but they didn't. So that.
But Andrew Wiggins matters. He matters tremendously.
But it's a separate conversation. So we'll get to the Butler versus Wiggins thing, I promise. I want to start with the easier things. I'm trying to start with the easy things. It's clearly good that they didn't have to put Moody, Kuminga, or Podziemski in this deal. It's clearly good that they didn't have to put an unprotected pick in this deal if things go totally, upside down. They still have, we'll see what the protection is, but I'm sure they have protection there. The second thing is the money. Ignore it because it doesn't matter. The Warriors are up against every conceivable thing that blocks you from just going out on the market and signing a big name player. They could not have done that. And the fact that Butler's going to make $60 million next year instead of $30 million, the only difference is money out of Joe Lacob's pocket. So Warrior fans, ignore it. It doesn't matter that Jimmy Butler's making $60 million. You weren't going to be able to trade him again anyway in the next 2 years. That affects the franchise bottom line to some degree. It does not affect the product on the court. So I wouldn't worry about his money at all. In his own way, he's earned it with an incredible NBA career. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Because it's certainly reasonable to take the position that I think you're taking, which is fine. Jimmy Butler.
Andrew Wiggins is better than Jimmy Butler.
Jimmy Butler has a history that's excellent, but right now, Chuck Walter prefers Andrew Wiggins to Jimmy Butler. And I'll tell you, although I think that's reasonable, I'll tell you why I think you're wrong. It's two things, basically. The first one is just at a baseline. Jimmy Butler brings a level of competitive fire and ability to call his own number that Andrew Wiggins never really had, and I think we can reasonably say never will have.
So you believe that everything we saw this year statistically from Jimmy Butler is just due to his notorious reputation for not giving a damn about the regular season?
Statistically, what do you mean? You just mean that his point total is
statistically, he's
down?
got the same numbers as Wiggins. That's what I'm saying. And Wiggins has been turning it on lately. He's been available.
He's scoring the same number of points. I believe Butler's shooting a better percentage from the field, although probably a little worse from three. But yes, I think the reason that he's scoring 17 points this year, which is, got to be a low for the last decade of Butler's career, is because he was less involved in the offense and he was playing less and he was shooting less. And there's a variety of reasons for that. I think some of it is the Heat's choice and I think that's part of why Jimmy Butler was upset. I also think some of it is him not playing his best at times, because we can argue about how he handled this, right? It's clearly not awesome the way he handled it. I do think it's pretty typical for NBA stars who want to call their own shots, but it doesn't make you feel great about him. And if he has the same attitude with the Warriors that he had with the Heat, then obviously this was a terrible trade, right? But even if he's in a weird place mentally, he just possesses a level of drive and aggressiveness that isn't part of what Andrew Wiggins brings to the floor. He might end up with the same numbers on any given night. Andrew Wiggins might outscore him on any given night, but you can't really count on Andrew Wiggins to do anything at any given time. Right?
I get that 100%, but 35 years of age, does that mean anything to you? Because we always talk about age and players historically slow down around this time.
It means something. And if this was a trade to make Jimmy Butler the number
You're
one
committing
guy
to him in the future. That's another thing. You're tied up to him. Forget the money. I mean, you were tied to him
for
being
2 years.
successful.
For 2 years. Yeah. They had to, do we agree they had to do something?
I'm intrigued. I'm not as pissed off as you would think. I do believe that like Wiggins and Butler, it's somewhat lateral, but let's put it this way.
Let me finish.
Butler better be better than Wiggins. That's the big thing that I take away from this trade. He better be significantly better than Andrew Wiggins here.
Oh, yeah. Of course he better be better.
Significantly, because you're throwing a first in there too.
Yeah, but I think reasonably what you would hope is that Jimmy Butler is a little better than Andrew Wiggins in that, like, you can go to him to go get a bucket semi-regularly. He's going to make it hard for teams to triple team Steph Curry the way they have been. Just right at the beginning, that's going to happen. I would hope that you get a slightly better version of Jimmy Butler than you had in Andrew Wiggins during the regular season. But let's be serious. The real reason that Jimmy Butler is a better option than Andrew Wiggins is because of playoff Jimmy. And with that, you have a chance to enter the postseason, however that ends up happening, with two legitimate fourth quarter killers on your basketball team. And even if Andrew Wiggins does every other thing that Jimmy Butler does, which I don't think he does, but even if he did, he's never going to be that guy. He's just never going to be that guy. And I think the Warriors decided, based on this year, look, with as much time as Draymond and Kuminga have missed, there's no doubt Andrew Wiggins has been the second most valuable player on the Warriors this year. So I'm not trying to diss Wiggins. But there's a level of killer that he just isn't. And Jimmy Butler just is. And obviously the Warriors were willing to gamble that killer comes out in a way that gives them a shot at this thing.
Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in Super Bowl bets, that's icing on the cake. And the $5, you could go to the point spread on the Super Bowl. FanDuel has it close right now. Chiefs slightly favored. Kansas City laying 1.5 against Philadelphia this Sunday. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
Can the Kansas City Chiefs make history as the first team to ever three-peat?
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to a Super Bowl preview between the Eagles and Chiefs twice in 3 years. I really didn't expect this again, and I think it's more from the, not to discredit what the Eagles have done this year because it was an incredible run, but after last year's collapse, I really didn't think that we'd be doing this just 1 year later. But that is where we're at. Eagles, Chiefs, second time in 3 years. And of course, the biggest storyline of this game is Kansas City is trying to make history and Philadelphia's trying to stop it as they could be the first team to ever three-peat. Chris, I want to start with you. When it comes to Kansas City and maybe the pressure of that, like Pat Mahomes at the parade last year was already talking about a three-peat. How much do you think that's weighing on them? Even though they already have 3 rings, like where does that kind of impact the team? Because it's, of course, a national media narrative that everybody's pushing, but how much is the team thinking about that right now?
I think they're probably thinking about it a little bit, but I don't think it's going to really give them any pressure. I think when you look at their season this year and how they played and every single game, well, just about every single game being close, one-score games, never scoring over 32 points or never scoring over 32 points in a game, and that was in the playoffs against the Bills. They've seemingly struggled by media standards the entire season. And to be back in the Super Bowl, knowing that all they got to do is win one more game, they have to show up, they have to win one game. And the nice thing for the Chiefs and the thing that benefits them the most is, yes, they have Patrick Mahomes, who's the best player in the NFL, but they also have a roster of probably 30 to 40 guys that know what this experience is like. They've been here before. They have 2 rosters. They have 2 draft classes full of guys that have played in nothing but Super Bowls, and getting ready to add a third at this point.
Yeah, and Ryan, I think it's interesting because it's almost like a battle of opposing philosophies. Not that the Eagles can't throw the football and not that the Chiefs can't run it or play good defense, but Kansas City's dynasty has been carried by, and again, their rosters have been very good, even though they're ever changing, but it's the Pat Mahomes, Andy Reid dynasty, very similar to what New England did with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, whereas Philadelphia, yeah, it's Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni getting to 2 Super Bowls in 3 years, but this team has been carried more off the backs of Saquon Barkley's historic year. A run-first team making it to the championship rarely happens, and of course, they were also the number 1 defense in football, so it's kind of interesting that both teams are complete and can do it all, but it is kind of a battle of opposing strengths. Like the Chiefs are led by a quarterback and head coach, which is what you normally think it takes for an NFL team to be a consistent title contender. And Philly's kind of doing it a different way this year.
It's throwback, honestly. And if you're somebody who grew up like I did, wanting what this is, the Eagles are doing more of what I would do if I was running this team, right? Because I don't have faith in just one guy, except he's an alien. Yeah. If it's not Patrick Mahomes, I don't know that I could buy into the whole process, but it is complete juxtaposition. And I would even argue a step further. When you say on the back of Saquon, I would say it's on the back of Lane Johnson or Mailata. That's how you get this done, because I think the modern NFL is more towards the Chiefs side, a little bit more finesse offensive line. The power doesn't come through. But if you're going to run the ball like you can here with this group and you're going to play defense, that's right up my alley. And while it will hurt to watch them go down, I do think that I will enjoy the way that they play the game.
And it's funny, I talked to Lane Johnson at Media Day New Orleans on Monday night, and he talked about how that meeting after the bye week, when they were 2-2 and still throwing it 30-plus times, and it felt very 2023-esque, that meeting where he, Landon Dickerson, Jordan Mailata sat down with Nick Sirianni and said, hey, we need to run the football more. We need to feature Saquon Barkley. And then suddenly they became the team that ran more in the NFL than anybody. It led to a 10-game win streak, which was a franchise record. They did not get the 1 seed, yet still made it to the Super Bowl. Like, that moment was a defining one for this team, and it could alter the course of the franchise's history. So it's kind of fascinating that most of the time the NFL says, hey, you're supposed to go in the opposite direction, and Philly said, no, that's not working. We need to kind of go back to the old school approach, and it worked. So I think it's really interesting. But I will say, another storyline for the Eagles, Jalen Hurts has an opportunity to really cement himself as a true elite quarterback. And yeah, there were times this year he had up and down performances as a passing quarterback, but I really do think he's elite in a different way, more of a Russell Wilson, a Cam Newton. Yeah, it's not the same as a Joe Burrow or a Josh Allen or even a Pat Mahomes, but if he gets a ring, and he's been to 2 Super Bowls in 3 years. He had one of the best Super Bowl performances I've ever seen 2 years ago. His playoff win percentage is up there with the all-time greats. Yeah, again, you might still not put him ahead of, you're not going to put him ahead of Mahomes, maybe not even Burrow, Lamar, Allen, but I don't know how you can debate anymore that he's in that top tier. At least that's in my opinion if he wins this game. Chris, what do you think about that, at least from a quarterback perspective when it comes to the storylines in this game?
Jalen Hurts outplayed Patrick Mahomes last year, or 2 years ago when they played in the Super Bowl. Quite simply, he outplayed him. Don't get me wrong, Mahomes made plays when it mattered, and he got his team to where they could win the game. But Jalen Hurts outplayed Mahomes, I'll say 95% of the game. Mahomes did it when it mattered most. That's really what it comes down to. And it's almost always what it comes down to with him. Yeah. I do think that Hurts is in a conversation of being one of those top tier quarterbacks. But it is a question of, can he get over the hump? Can he get a Super Bowl ring? And this is his opportunity to go out and beat. And I know QBs don't play each other, but to go out and beat Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, it matters.
And that says something.
Ryan, is there another, of course, the three-peat is just, everywhere with the Kansas City storylines, but is there another key thing in this game that we should have eyes on outside of them making history with that 3 straight?
It's really the fact that it is not just the offense. This, again, like last season, is a balanced team that had to do it together because you don't have everything that you wanted on offense. It's been, honestly, a season of attrition. They've tried, I don't know how many combinations of getting this player to do that and drafting this player to do that, where they just had to keep reinventing this team. And it has to happen on both sides of the ball. And it really is, I think, one thing that we can sit back and win, lose, or draw this particular Super Bowl, you can say this is an entire team going towards that three-peat chance together as a unit. And I think that's something special.
An annoying loss, but a positive process.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers.
It was definitely a frustrating finish to that ball game. Obviously, with Missouri leading by as much as 11 points in the second half. Really, it felt like Missouri did just about everything right in the first half of that ball game. And it's not as though Missouri was terrible in the second half, in my opinion. In fact, I'll give Tennessee the credit. I thought, obviously, Ziegler was incredible. Obviously, the young man who I thought was the fulcrum for the Tennessee team, Igor Milicic, when he gets going offensively, things just get a lot easier for Tennessee, especially with that jump shot, because he really is a multi-talented and multifaceted player at both ends of the court. And Tennessee's definitely going to be a threat, as they seemingly are every year under Rick Barnes, to make a run in the NCAA tournament. And with all that said, an excellent Tennessee ball club and defense that made 10 out of 15 from downtown, a lot of those coming in the second half. Again, Ziegler, not the best three-point shooter on the planet, but made 4 out of 4 of his threes, all 7 of his free throws as well. That's pretty much on brand for Ziegler. But those three-pointers by Tennessee, that's not really something you'd expect. You can blame Missouri's defense to some extent, but I'm going to give the Volunteers a lot of credit. Missouri had Tennessee, much like it had Kansas, I thought, discombobulated offensively. A lot of uncharacteristic turnovers by the Vols and Ziegler in the first half. But much like Kansas, well, a much better job of handling said pressure in the second half. And, well, unlike Kansas, obviously Tennessee was able to pull out the victory. But again, with all that being said, a 57-point second half by Tennessee. My goodness. With all of that being said, the fact that Missouri only lost that game by 4 on what is really a very underrated, tough place to play on the road in college basketball, I thought overall this was a fairly encouraging result. I'm not going to go as far to say it was a moral victory. I don't really believe in that term. Just in terms of projecting forward, again, I don't know how you can be deeply encouraged by what you saw out there today. We can nitpick some things. We can be disappointed by certain players' performances. We can get to that here in a little bit. But really, overall, this is a Tennessee team that is easily a top 10 type of unit. So if Missouri can go on the road, weather the storm, that type of hot second half, and, well, still have a puncher's chance there at the end, that tells me Missouri is at the very least right on the cusp of being a top 10 type of unit itself. And here's the thing. If you're the rest of the league, if you're the rest of the SEC right now, which obviously is full of formidable opponents, you're not looking at a 4-loss by Missouri, where Tennessee obviously shot the lights out and played great in the second half, and you're going, well, that team's a fraud. We don't have anything to worry about them anymore, especially with the Tigers tied for third place still, especially tied with Texas A&M, who the Tigers are playing on Saturday. So another great opportunity to pick up a huge win for Missouri on Saturday. Again, for the millionth time, life on the road is pretty brutal in the SEC every season, but especially this season. I think Missouri's going to have a really good chance to bounce back against, well, another solid Buzz Williams Texas A&M Aggies team this weekend. So to my point about the league reaction surrounding this game, I just got an unsolicited text in my group chat with the rest of the Locked On SEC hosts out there, and Clint Shamblin, the Georgia host, well, he said, hey, is Missouri just a heck of a lot better at basketball than everybody is thinking? And, well, I think the answer is quite simply yes. I think the nation, the SEC, starting to take notice here. That's what happens when you're 15th in the AP poll. And, again, despite losing to number 4 Tennessee tonight by 4 in Knoxville, not exactly an embarrassment. Again, if anything, I think people are taking notice of the Missouri Tigers right now. Frankly, as well they should. Again, not trying to slap everybody on the back with a moral victory here, but if I'm projecting forward and being as objective as I can, well, really, that was probably a positive outcome if you're looking at Missouri to be, say, a top 4 or 5 seed, that type of thing, in March Madness. And while it was it was definitely an efficient night from Caleb Grill, overall, it was a quiet night from Caleb Grill, and I would definitely give Tennessee a lot of credit there. At all times, it just seemed like they were determined to have one defender on Grill, just remaining on him. He was not going to help off of Grill whatsoever, and, well, that's certainly a tactic I would take if I'm any coach remaining so far in the season here. And the thing with Caleb Grill, again, he was 4 of 5 from the field, 2 of 3 from the 3-point line. The disappointing part, just only 5 shots. I would have thought that Missouri could have found a way to get Grill some more looks than that. For example, Chaz Lanier, the excellent Tennessee shooter, well, especially in that second half run there by Tennessee, Barnes had found some pin down looks in the corner that had been rather successful. Would have liked to see just some kind of maybe different action to get Grill open. But again, mostly I'm just going to give Tennessee the credit there. And really, Missouri just needed a little bit more from a few of its mainstays. In particular, Mark Mitchell, again, just struggling against length in the paint and just seems a little bit double clutchy, I'll say. There's a word I just made up, but just not going up maybe. I don't know. It just seems like he's unsure with the ball in the paint right now, exactly what to do, whether he should go up strong, as they say, or look to draw contact and get to the free throw line when he is where he is, by the way, a pretty mediocre free throw shooter as well. So not necessarily a lot of great answers emerging for Mitchell at the moment, whose overall game, especially his defensive game, his playmaking, I like, but right now, man, he is really struggling to put the ball in the basket around the paint. And also Anthony Robinson, my goodness, 4 fouls in the ball game and basically hardly any time played whatsoever. 6 minutes in the ball game for Anthony Robinson and 4 fouls, no points. He's got to be better than that. Now, he did get 3 fouls in the game, so some of that, 3 steals in the game. So some of that aggression did pay off. But once again, this is becoming a pattern for Anthony Robinson. I think he's a really good player that has tremendous potential still to be tapped into. Well, he's not going to tap into it if he's sitting on the bench in foul trouble all the time. So the good news is I like guys who are a little bit maybe pushing towards the aggressive side. Hey, I'd rather rein somebody in than teach them how to be aggressive, if that makes sense. So not terribly worried about Anthony Robinson in the long term. But for this season, he's got to stop putting his teammates in a bind by getting into foul trouble lately. So that's a big thing I would watch from here on out from Anthony Robinson.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Imagine going to the big game this Sunday. That's what a lot of the people around me here on Radio Row are going to do, and the fans who are coming to New Orleans. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have time searching. Inspiration makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and take the work on tickets. Gametime. Download Gametime, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Chris Middleton is no longer a member of the Milwaukee Bucks, and Kyle Kuzma is.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast.
The Milwaukee Bucks have traded Chris Middleton, AJ Johnson, a first-round pick swap in 2028 for Kyle Kuzma, Patrick Baldwin Jr., and a 2025 second-round pick. So I'm going to be going to the comments for this as well, just to get some of your opinions on it. But I'm in shock. Like, we've been hearing the rumblings that the Bucks were going to make a move. We've been hearing the rumblings that Kyle Kuzma was one of those guys. But we've been hearing a lot of names, right? We were hearing Jimmy Butler. We were hearing Bradley Beal. Then we started hearing the Kyle Kuzma talk, and they kept on building. And now we are here. It is not official yet, quote unquote, but it's in the works. It's looking like it's going to happen. So why? That was the very first question that I had when I saw the news. Why? And when you look at the whys, you can look at Chris Middleton's performance so far this season. Double ankle surgery, that's hard to overcome. We have seen, he seemed like he's lost the step. We have seen it, but I still had some hope personally that come playoff time, he'd be able to contribute. And him being that third option role, gave me a little bit more confidence in it because we weren't going to need Chris to be the Chris Middleton that he was in 2021 when the Bucks won a championship. We just needed someone to be a connector piece to kind of help out on the edges there. And it's not going to happen. I think the part of it that disappoints me the most in this move is that we never got a chance to see Dame, Giannis, and Chris in the playoffs together healthy. Shoot, we haven't gotten a chance to see Chris and Giannis in the playoffs healthy together since they won that championship. And that's the part of it for me that is disappointing about this experience. But why? Why would you make this move? What do the Bucks benefit from it? The first one, you get under that second apron. And we understand how big of a deal that was for the Bucks to get underneath the second apron. Getting Kyle Kuzma's contract in there, moving off of AJ Johnson, it cuts about $8.5 million off of the Bucks' salary to get him under that second apron for this season, which does open up greater flexibility for this team to make additional moves. So now they can aggregate contracts as long as they don't bring in more dollars than what they send out. That was not on the table beforehand, right? So you do have a bit more roster flexibility in how you're able to continue to build out this roster. The Bucks believe with Kyle Kuzma, apparently they believe with Kyle Kuzma, it can help unlock some Giannis at 5 lineups. They believe in Kuz's defense. They believe in Kuz being able to help the Bucks play even faster going forward. We'll see how that turns out, because if you look at the numbers alone of what Kyle Kuzma has been doing this season, it doesn't inspire much confidence that he's going to be able to come in and excel in that role. You know what I mean? Like, Kyle Kuzma is shooting under 30% from 3 this season. Under 30% from 3 this season. He is shooting 28% from 3 on 5 attempts a game. And you might be like, hey, it's just a bad year, down year. He had some injuries that he's coming back from. Understood. But he's a career 33% three-point shooter. His best year, 36, 37% three-point shooter. He's going to have to be better than that for the Bucks on this team. But I got so many thoughts, y'all. I got so many thoughts. It's hard to even know where exactly to start with it, because Chris Middleton, everydayers know, Chris Middleton's been my favorite Buck for quite some time, and his place in Bucks franchise history is solid. First in threes, third in assists, third in points, fifth in steals, seventh in rebounds, all time a great. It hurts to see him go. And as more time continues to pass, like if I would have did this live pod immediately as the news was breaking, I don't think I would have been able to be as illogical about the whys behind it and what does this do for this team. And I guess the first question that I have for everybody out there is for you to think about this. If the Bucks did not make a move at all this season, what do you think that the ceiling for this team was, assuming health, with Giannis, with Chris, with Dame? What do you think that the ceiling of this team was? I had this question I asked on social media to some of my followers as well. And the common refrain that I got back was about a second round exit. Second round seemed to be the ceiling that most people saw for this team before making any moves. Do you think that that ceiling has drastically decreased now with Kyle Kuzma being on the team? Personally, I don't think the Bucks are as good with Kyle Kuzma as they were, even with this version of Chris Middleton with the 2 ankles that still need some work. But I don't think that this move has also decreased the ceiling for this team this season. I still could see this team getting to the second round, still see this team in that same atmosphere, even if Chris Middleton's not part of the picture. So for this season, like, yeah, they might be a little bit worse, so to speak, but I think that the quote unquote ceiling for this team is still around the same, because so much of it depended on Giannis and Dame being who they are, getting there healthy, being able to perform. So in that sense of it, like, that helps this be a little bit of an easier pill to swallow. But man, sending Chris to the Wizards, the worst team in the league. I mean, I know you can't help that, but it is what it is. We were hearing so much at first, about Jimmy Butler possibly being traded to the Bucks. Then we started hearing Bradley Beal's name thrown around as somebody who might be traded to the Bucks. And honestly, the Bradley Beal conversation, I had never seen the fan base more united in a move that they did not want to happen when Bradley Beal's name was thrown out there. And it made me think like, hey, maybe the Bucks are leaking this information so that when they actually make the move that they do make, it don't feel as bad. Like getting Kyle Kuzma after hearing that Bradley Beal was an option, so on and so forth, you might feel a little bit more encouraged by that. But with Bradley Beal coming to town, Lord, with Kyle Kuzma coming to town, one thing that I am glad about, and I see Samuel in the comments mention this, the comments are coming quick, y'all. I'm trying to keep up with y'all, but he said, I'm glad we didn't give up our 2031 pick, and I could not agree more with that piece of it. I am so glad that the Bucks did not have to give up that draft compensation in order to facilitate this trade. But what they did have to give up on the way is AJ Johnson, our first round draft pick from this year. So really throwing AJ Johnson into this trade in my book is like adding an additional first round pick into the trade calculations. AJ Johnson was somebody who came into the league, was like, who needed the development. You saw him getting his reps down on the G League with the Herd. He was somebody who wasn't expected, to come and contribute this year, but he was somebody who the Bucks had high hopes in his development and being able to contribute in the years coming. So he's now out the door along with Chris Middleton. One of the things that I said that my main goal for the trade deadline for the Bucks would be for them to get under that second apron and for them to be able to clear off a roster spot in order for them to be able to take Ryan Rollins' contract from a two-way contract to a standard contract, right? And with this trade of them bringing back Kuzma and Baldwin while sending out Chris and AJ Johnson, they did not clear the roster spot for that to happen. But again, they were able to open up the flexibility to aggregate contracts. So my initial thoughts on this move, if this is the only move that the Bucks make at the trade deadline, I will be disappointed that this is the only move. I don't think that it changed necessarily what the ceiling of this team could be, even though I think that they are worse. I think that they still have a shot as long as they have a healthy Dame and a healthy Giannis. But there has to be something else, I feel like. I would need to see them find a way to be able to translate Rollins' contract over to a full-time one. And on top of that, too, here's a question I have for y'all, and I want you to think about. One thing that we have heard Giannis say about this Milwaukee Bucks team and his time being here is that he wants to be here as long as they show that they are serious about contributing or being able to go after a championship. We need to be competitive. I need to know that this franchise cares as much about chasing these championships as I do. That's what we've heard from Giannis consistently. Does this move do that? Does this move do that? In a vacuum? I don't think so, but I do think that it opens avenues for them to continue to do that. We have talked about how the CBA is so restrictive to what the Bucks can do in any other team that is over that second apron. If you stay in that second apron for too long, then you talk about getting some draft picks frozen in the future. And that's hard to deal with, but it's like your window is now. Your window is now. How much better did the Bucks get? We're going to see. I still think that this Bucks team needs another big. Maybe Kyle Kuzma can do that. And I think that's one of the hopes of Kyle Kuzma, being able to unlock those Giannis at 5 lineups, because in the small sample sizes that we have seen with Giannis being the small ball 5 for this team, the rebounding has suffered. Theoretically, Kyle Kuzma should be able to come in there and help clean that up in those small ball lineups. Kyle Kuzma should work in those lineups. Kyle Kuzma has shown when he was a role player on that Laker team, those Laker teams, and the Laker team that won championship, that he is someone who can do the dirty work, that he is somebody who can cut, get you some boards, play some defense. Maybe that's what the Bucks need. We're going to see. Time will tell. Time will tell how this move works, but like I can kind of understand it. I don't necessarily like it in this moment, but I can somewhat understand the why behind it, right? Especially if you're looking at the health of Chris Middleton and you're having some concerns about if he's going to be able to be available come playoff time. It just hurts. It just hurts to see somebody who has given so much to the franchise, who helped this team win a championship, traded, especially to Washington. No offense, Washington, but y'all know. Y'all know what race y'all in this year, and it is not for the playoffs, ain't even for the play-in. It is for that draft positioning next year. So it does hurt to see, Chris being traded to a Washington Wizards team that doesn't have really any aspirations this season of going anywhere. Cool to see Middleton and Brogdon reunited. But again, in a vacuum, I feel like there needs to be a little bit more for this team. But it's weird because it's like, I don't think the ceiling necessarily changed. Like, this could work. And John Horst is counting on it working. I do hope that, Giannis has the buy into it. I hope that Giannis understands the future of what they're trying to accomplish here. And I still think they need a big. We'll see if Kuz can provide some of that small ball big role of it. But we'll see if this is the only move that the Bucks make.
Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in Super Bowl bets, that's icing on the cake. And the $5, you could go to the point spread on the Super Bowl. FanDuel has it close right now. Chiefs slightly favored. Kansas City laying 1.5 against Philadelphia this Sunday. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
Brandon Ingram has been traded to the Toronto Raptors.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast.
The deal that I see right now, and I'm literally doing this live here, it's going to be Bruce Brown Jr., Kelly Olynyk, and multiple draft picks coming back to the New Orleans Pelicans. I think I'm still waiting on what those exact draft picks are, but from what I got texted, it's a first and second round pick at the very least, and we'll figure out the specifics of what those what the picks are. So this is a move that we kind of expected, right? We knew Brandon Ingram was going to get traded by this team here, and so it's not a big shock that it went like this. Getting a first-round pick, getting a second-round pick, getting expiring salary, that's kind of what they were looking for here. It was going to be some combination of that, but this was not going to be a tremendous haul for the New Orleans Pelicans, a la the Anthony Davis trade or some other deals that we've expected. Given the circumstances as of today, and more on this in the next segment here, this was about as good as New Orleans probably was going to be able to do. And if you listen to the show yesterday, the Everydayers heard this. A lot of y'all heard this. It was well listened to. When we looked at Toronto, I said, no way are they going to bring RJ Barrett back. You had to, in this deal, factor in the Pelicans salary cap next year. So they were going to look for expiring salary, and if they carried any money over, it was going to be in a smaller range. Thus, you get Bruce Brown Jr., who's on a $23 million expiring deal, and then Kelly Olynyk, who's going to make next year $13.445 million. That fits in the Pelicans' room to the luxury tax that they have. Right now, if you would just let everyone kind of walk off the books with Trey Murphy's extension kicking in, which adds $20 million to the books next year, you can fit in that $13.5 million from Kelly Olynyk because gives the Pelicans then about $8-9 million to the luxury tax threshold to fill out the rest of the roster. So this fits in the financial constraints that New Orleans was probably kind of had over their head when it comes to this deal. That's why they didn't get an RJ Barrett back. That's what I told you in yesterday's show. Specifically mentioned they weren't going to take back RJ Barrett in this. This deal was also complicated by the fact that Brandon Ingram is due for a lot of money, right? And so you look at that and you realize it was just always going to be a divorce. There's a couple of things with this deal that, kind of made sense that this was going to end up happening. And as I said just a moment ago, all things considered, I think the Pelicans did about as good of a job as they could getting a first-round pick back. I see a lot of y'all saying it's a Pacers 2026 first-round pick that is 1 to 4 protected. That's fine. Look, it's not that pick's going to be likely in the early 20s, early to mid 20s. Getting a first-round draft pick for him that you can use to try and improve the roster later or for whatever you might want to do, I think ends up being a pretty good deal here. Olynyk's likely going to be moved with that pick in some capacity in the future. By doing this deal, the Pelicans fix their financial books and keep things okay for next year. It's not an amazing deal. The only way you would have gotten an amazing deal was maybe 2 years ago on Brandon Ingram, or even last year when there was a very real market for him. And more on that in the second and third segment here when we look at a lot of the mistakes that this front office has made with this sort of situation here. But overall, they getting a first-round pick back that's like a usable first-round pick. If you look at the return for De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento, 3 first-round picks, that's more than they got for Luka, right? One of those is literally going to turn into 2 second-round picks, and that's not really a great thing. We don't know what this second-round pick that they're getting back is either, but that's a very useful thing to get too. So this trade for New Orleans is not really about the players. It's about the salary cap flexibility and the draft picks. Right? They're out of contention this season. They're not making the playoffs at all this season. Bruce Brown Jr., who's expiring, doesn't really matter. Kelly Olynyk doesn't matter whatsoever here. So that to me says, okay, who really cares about the players? It's about the picks. I will say this helps New Orleans in future trades. When you look at players that are on the roster next season that are making, say, $15-ish million, somewhere in that range, it's literally just Herb Jones and now Olynyk. So that's a really useful type of salary to have to try and trade someone out. If you wanted to get a $20 million player for your $13.5 million player, New Orleans can make this work now, and they couldn't do that before. So it's not a great return for Brandon Ingram in terms of basketball playing talent, but it is a good enough return. Again, given the circumstances, and that's important here, for the flexibility here. And when you look at this deal, this is better than losing Brandon Ingram for nothing, in my opinion. Olynyk next year doesn't kill your books whatsoever, and I think that's a really important thing, that is someone that doesn't put them in a bad position. If you had traded for RJ Barrett, along with, say, Chris Boucher or someone expiring, then all of a sudden you would have been over the luxury tax already, and we would have been doing this dance leading up to the trade deadline ahead of time to try and duck the luxury tax. So that's where I think this ends up being a fine deal for the New Orleans Pelicans here. So there you go. There's a flip side of this too, as well, of you just made the Toronto Raptors better. This is a team that I get this from their perspective and I don't. This is a team that could have been competing, right, for a top draft pick. Now you kind of take them out of that equation depending on when Brandon Ingram returns. So this helps the New Orleans Pelicans tank. It hurts another team's tank. It gives you financial flexibility. When you kind of put that up and look at it as of today at 11:08 p.m. on Wednesday, February 5th, it's been a 2 days, y'all. That's as good of a deal and a situation as you're going to find. Is that as good of a trade as you would have gotten a year ago? Absolutely not. 2 years ago? Absolutely not. And I want to acknowledge that here. But given the circumstances right now, about as good as you could really have hoped for in a position like this.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Imagine going to the big game this Sunday. That's what a lot of the people around me here on Radio Row are going to do, and the fans who are coming to New Orleans. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have time searching. Inspiration makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and take the work on tickets. Gametime. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Ohio State is promoting Brian Hartline to offensive coordinator.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ohio State is promoting Brian Hartline to offensive coordinator. And there are numerous things to like about this promotion for Brian Hartline. It seems like he has been in line to get this promotion once again, and he got it after Chip Kelly left for the NFL. And this may have been the plan all along when Chip Kelly was hired, that whenever Chip Kelly left, that Brian Hartline would be the next guy in line to take that role of offensive coordinator. Brian Hartline's a great recruiter. We have seen a track record of success that has put him at the top of the receiving recruiting in the country. He's a great developer of talent. Jeremiah Smith this year. You have Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and others. Go back to Terry McLaurin. There are a lot of guys that Brian Hartline has developed and has been very hands-on with, and it shows up in big ways on the football field. Brian Hartline is also a novice, and I don't think this is the time to make a novice the offensive coordinator of Ohio State, especially when Ohio State's trying to run it back in 2025. Now, that could be the only negative part about this hire, but that's a very big part. When you're trying to run it back and go back-to-back and win the Natty in 2024 and 2025, you want to make sure the person running the offensive side of the ball is a guy that can run it, that has experience, has a track record of success, that can be a guy that can command the room right away. And I think Brian Hartline can command the room. I'm not saying he can't. But there's a track record of success, and even these high school kids, they'll look at it and they'll search and they'll dig and they'll say, hey, man, you ain't done this before. Now, Ohio State might not get a lot of those guys in-house, but that's something very, very important that I think might be missing in 2024 or maybe could not be a problem at all. But my first thought, we talked about it here on the show, was go out and get a guy that's experienced as a head coach that has a great offensive mind, a well-respected person leading offenses in college football or in the National Football League, and bring that person in. Now, maybe with the time period that Ryan Day took between Chip Kelly leaving and promoting Brian Hartline, maybe there were some things that Ryan Day did to try to lure somebody else in that fit certain criteria, and maybe things just didn't go the way that he wanted them to go. Or maybe things took a little bit longer if this was the plan when Chip Kelly left, that Brian Hartline maybe wanted a little bit more money, or Ryan Day wanted to fill in the other offensive coaching staff spots before announcing the promotion. I have no idea. This may have been the plan all along, and if it was, cool. But there are still questions about it. We can question things when somebody gets hired or promoted because it's what we do. We have opinions, and we share them here on the show. But if Ohio State lost Brian Hartline at any point in time, maybe when he interviewed for the Cincy job, or maybe when he interviewed for the West Virginia job this year, maybe if he were to leave for one of those jobs, you lose Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis, maybe a Bryson Rogers, maybe a Quincy Porter. Maybe you lose Chris Henry Jr., who's not even here yet, but he's the number one receiver in the class of 2026, and he definitely looks the part. When I watch him play the football, he is one of those dudes at the high school level. Maybe you lose those guys. Maybe you lose more. Maybe you take a massive dip in recruiting. I don't know. But all those things are actually things that I think Ryan Day was thinking about. Do I want to lose Jeremiah Smith? Absolutely not. Do I want to lose my top 3 receivers in the room, or maybe 4 or 5 of the top 7? No, absolutely not. So what can I do to keep him? Keep Brian Hartline. I think this is a massive move for Ohio State recruiting in general, not just with recruiting and retaining the guys on the roster, but also with guys like Chris Henry Jr. and others. I think moving forward, you're going to see Brian Hartline's impact all across offensive recruiting. We're going to talk more about O-line recruiting in the very next segment, but I think even Brian Hartline can help the O-line recruiting because he is great at building relationships. And with him being more hands-on moving forward with Ohio State's offense, this is going to help the offensive linemen, the running backs, and everybody out there make sure every position on offense doesn't have a deficit, doesn't become a weak link. You can make sure with Brian Hartline here, because of his track record of success, leading his own room, developing that room, being influential with the offense, I think you can trust that other rooms across Ohio State's offense will be very, very strong across the board. If there's a weak link, we know there will be a weak link it won't be such a massive weak link that we can't overcome it. That's not something I think is going to happen. Not only was Brian Hartline's promotion announced, there were also 2 more guys that were added to Ohio State's assistant coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball that were pretty big hires, and they were really big deals. One of them is Tyler Bowen. He was the offensive coordinator at Virginia Tech. He is now Ohio State's offensive line coach, replacing Justin Fry. And then Billy Fessler, who was an offensive analyst last year at Ohio State. He is now Ohio State's quarterback coach this year. And that name, Billy Fessler, has been one that has been talked about for a very long time, at least in this year. Will Howard credits Billy Fessler for a lot of his development and a lot of his growth this year for the way that Will Howard played. He not only talks about Chip Kelly and Ryan Day, but he gives a lot of credit to Billy Fessler and his work with Howard throughout the season. But Tyler Bowen's another one, and that's one that maybe a lot of people hadn't heard that name before. He is 35 years old, from Helena, Georgia. Played college, went to Maryland, was a student assistant at Maryland in 2010. He's been at a lot of schools along the way. Fordham. He was with James Franklin at Penn State from 2018 to 2019, or to 2020. He was with Urban Meyer in 2021. Then went to Virginia Tech from the 2022 to 2024 seasons, and now he's at Ohio State. I go back to Penn State on purpose because I think with the Penn State thing, that says a lot about him as a recruiter. Because James Franklin is a guy that makes sure his guys work, his guys grind. And when you get a guy that's been a grinder, that's been working, and also that's willing to go from being the OC at a ACC school to being an O-line coach, that says a lot about him. That says a lot about him and his career and the ability for him to take a step back a little bit, take a different job, come to Ohio State in what is going to be a very important year for Ohio State, and take a role that is with a unit that, if everything goes well, Ohio State's offensive line is going to be one of the best ones, not only in the Big Ten, it has the opportunity to be one of the best offensive lines in the country. And so Tyler Bowen coming in, and I think him working with in Jacksonville with Urban Meyer is probably a big reason why he's at Ohio State. Because I know Ryan Day and Urban Meyer are close, and Ryan Day calls him and talks to him, and Urban Meyer stays around the program as much as he can. If something just tells me, as I'm saying this right now, that Ryan Day made a phone call or 2 or 10 to Urban Meyer about Tyler Bowen and trying to sift through all the stuff, all the good stuff, all the bad stuff, to see if he was the right man for the job. And all accounts he is. We don't have enough data because he just got to campus to know if he is going to drastically boost the O-line recruiting, or drastically boost the run game, or drastically boost this or that. We don't have enough days of him on the job in Columbus, Ohio to know that just yet. But I got to believe that Ryan Day, as he's knocked a lot of hires out of the park, that he knocked this one out too. The Billy Fessler one doesn't surprise me. I said all along, if you're going to bring in an offensive coordinator from outside of the program, you're going to bring him in and have him work either with the O-line or work with the quarterback. When you promote Brian Hartline, he's already with the receivers, at least 2 of the offensive spots to fill in. Well, Billy Fessler seems like a no-brainer promotion. Cool, quarterback. Offensive line. A former OC, coaching the O-line, sign me up for that every day of the week and twice on Sunday. I got no problems with that. So the offensive coaching staff is set. You have Tyler Bowen on the O-line, Coach Key with the tight ends. You got Hartline with the receivers and the offensive coordinator. You have Billy Fessler with the quarterbacks, Lachlan with the running backs, and Ryan Day is still running the whole entire operation. Not mad about it. Not mad about that at all. All the things about Brian Hartline that I don't know if he's going to be able to call plays or not, that stuff will be figured out. Ryan Day could run mock games and try to do things in scrimmages to run full games to get Brian Hartline some real live action in practice in the summer and the fall to try to figure everything out. Trust me, Ryan Day can figure this thing out as he goes. He's been coaching for a long time. That leaves just one more assistant coaching spot left. It's defensive coordinator. There are rumors that Ohio State's going to promote from within and make Matt Guerrieri and Tim Walton co-defensive coordinators. I've also seen that Ryan Day might hire somebody from outside. Who knows what's going to happen? I've heard one rumor. I've heard another. I'm going to wait and see what Ryan Day decides to do. But all I do know is if Ryan Day decides to go with the co-DC promotion for Guerrero and Tim Walton, I would love for Ryan Day to make that last assistant coaching hire to go with a defensive line coach to pair with Larry Johnson to bridge the gap and to pave the way for Larry Johnson's retirement. So there's no vacancy or there's no absence for a D-line coach. You already know who the next guy is when Larry Johnson retires because he's already on staff